I got to play it again because I love it. It is clip number 4, please.
Tucker Carlson with a bold prediction saying Michelle Obama just may be the Democratic ticket next year, despite the former First Lady saying she's not interested. Michael Blake, Vice Chair of the DNC and a New York State Assemblyman. How you doing, Mike? Nice to see you, sir. What do you think of the prediction on Michelle Obama? Would you like to see that?
Well, she's not running, but the core question is, why the hell does Tucker Carlson still have a job here in the first place? The reality is, this is someone who said white supremacy is a hoax, and why does Fox allow him to still be here in the first place?
All right. Well, I mean, his opinion there is that Michelle Obama may get in this race. Do you think that will happen, or
not going to happen? Not going to happen. But I think the core question is, he shouldn't be on here at all.
I get it. We didn't bring you on to talk about Tucker Carlson. I brought you on to talk about the Democratic field. But are you happy right now with what you see in these candidates?
Absolutely, because I see each of them are defeating Donald Trump.
So what do you think? Maybe a mic up like twice, and Bill Hemmer's like, we didn't bring you on here. You're here to talk about this.
Well, I know Michael Blake. I respect him. He's an awesome politician, really good guy, very stand up, and I just think it's hilarious. He basically used his opportunity and used his platform to call out something that this is actually really dangerous. I mean, the Tucker Carlson show is white power hour. I mean, it is there, and there's no one should be. I think we are now at the point in this country where no one can hide, no one can start kind of like fudging things. Call things what they are, and that's exactly what Tucker Carlson. And it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous.
I call him Tucker Klansman. That's his name. That's what I tweet. That's what I call him. And to remind people, when Michael Blake was referring to that Tucker Carlson called white supremacy a hoax, well, play the clip. But to remind people, he said it while they were literally burying bodies in El Paso by a man who was a self-avowed white supremacist, walked from the mall targeting brown people. He killed a bunch of brown innocent men, women, and children. And there's Tucker Carlson going, this is not really a problem. This is ridiculous. That's beyond David Duke. I don't even know if David Duke, frankly, would have said that garbage. Here is clip number 3, please.
If you were to assemble a list, a hierarchy of concerns, of problems this country faces, where would white supremacy be on the list? Right up there with Russia, probably. It's actually not a real problem in America. The combined membership of every white supremacist organization in this country would be able to fit inside a college football stadium? I mean, seriously. This is a country where the average person is getting poorer, where the suicide rate is spiking. White supremacy, that's the problem. This is a hoax. Just like the Russia hoax, it's a conspiracy theory used to divide the country and keep a hold on power.
So is white supremacy, as a woman of color, is white supremacy a problem in this country?
Of course it is. Of course it is. One need only look at the number of mass shootings we've had by white young people, usually young men, and the rhetoric that they've used. You know, white domestic terrorism is on the rise. And what we need really is for, if only we had a functioning attorney general, but what we need is for the Department of Justice to recognize it and to act on it. It's a real serious problem. It's a rising problem. And what's happening now, I think, in 2019 in America is that the person in the White House is activating the white supremacists. He really is. And he does it through his immigration programs. He does it through the Muslim ban. He does it like there's so many signals that are being sent that it is okay to treat certain people a certain way because of the color of their skin or where they come from. And it's not a coincidence that the number of hate crimes has gone up ever since he became president. And the number of hate crimes has also gone up in areas where he's spoken, which I think is very interesting. So Trump's a white supremacist. He enables white supremacists. He makes them feel comfortable. And then we ought to also talk about Stephen Miller, who was in the White House and sort of the person making these policies that are harmful to people of color. How do we know that they're harmful to people of color? Look at what's going on at the border, where you have babies in cages, where you have children being ripped apart from their parents. That Stephen Miller is the architect of those programs. And I am surprised that he is still in the White House and that people aren't up in arms calling for him to resign. I know that a few congressmen and women have called for him to resign, but there needs to be a real serious push for this to happen because he's dangerous.
I agree. And
like this stuff is not fun and games, you know?
No, and we covered a little bit, but it came out in the middle of the impeachment tsunami of news where the Southern Poverty Law Center had uncovered emails that Stephen Miller had sent to Steve Bannon, who used to be at Breitbart, and others, just completely spewing white supremacist, white nationalist themes. And there's no disputing what this guy is. His record as a person says that. By the way, speaking of people on the border, I had Congresswoman Yvette Clarke on yesterday, who was just this weekend down there. Yeah. And she went there with her. Karen Bass and Barbara Lee and others to highlight the black migrants, thousands of black migrants who came from either Caribbean countries or from Africa, and they had come through the southern border, and they're being held in inhumane conditions as well.
Yes.
And I think they brought it up to make, I think honestly, was first fact-finding, but secondly, to bridge the issue so that if you're not concerned about it for whatever reason, and say you're African American, you're like, well, I'm concerned a little bit, but now it's even more vested concern. There are other African Americans or Africans who are being treated inhumanely there along. And she made the point, there's black people in Mexico, they don't speak Spanish. They don't even speak English.
Right.
They speak their original language. They goes, you know how hard that is for them?
Yeah.
And then they get taken into custody. They try to sneak in or they try to apply for asylum and they just kept in a cage.
Yeah.
This is unreal what's going on.
I'm glad that she went down to the border to highlight this issue. It's important that we keep the spotlight on this issue and not allow it to be something that we accept and not allow it to become a normal thing, a normal way in which we handle people who are in dire need of being treated as human beings. And I'm so glad she did that. You know, it's important to keep the spotlight on that border because this is being done in our name as Americans. I mean, the Trump administration is effectively running concentration camps, and many of those camps are run by for-profit companies. So they are incentivized to keep these people locked up and in cages. And if this administration really believed that the number of people coming in was too much and that they couldn't deal with it, then hire more judges to process these cases, hire more attorneys to represent these people. I mean, there's so many ways around this to make it a program that is efficient and effective. And I am not, and I always push back on this, no one is calling for open borders, right?
Right.
But we have a law on the books, which this is another thing I think should be added to articles of impeachment as well, is that the president of the United States is not following the law as it is right now with respect to asylum and how we treat and deal with people who are looking for asylum. That law exists for a reason.
Right.
And it's because the United States of America recognizes that there are people who are in dire need, who face persecution wherever it is that they come from. And when they get here, they legally can apply for asylum when they arrive at our borders. Now, when you apply for asylum, it's not necessarily a slam dunk. You have to prove your case.
And it's hard to do.
And it's hard to do. Yeah, so let them try and prove their case. And if they can't, do what it is that the law says you have to do, which is send them back. Right. But at least give them a shot. The fact that he won't give them a shot, again, signaling, I don't respect these people. I don't think they deserve to be treated as human beings. They don't deserve dignity. And that's the signaling that you're constantly getting from Trump and this administration.
The only open border I would like to see is between New York and New Jersey, because if I go to Jersey and come back over New York, it's like $15 in the GW. That should be free. It's unbelievable. It's literally $15 now, unless you have an Easy Pass.
I went last Saturday and I came back through the Holland Tunnel. It was $15. I'm like, I remember when this was $6.
I remember when it was $1 to come to the GW. I didn't do the Holland Tunnel a lot. The GW was $1 at one point when I was going to college or something. I went to Fordham in the Bronx and Fordham Law in Lincoln Center. And it was literally $1 when I first did it, and that was like the first year, and then it went up after that. Okay. It became $1.50, $2, and you could buy these little books. You touched on impeachment for a second. We were having a discussion with Todd, who calls in a lot, and we talk about this. And he was saying, and we've not had a full-throated discussion on this, and I want to have it at some point, but I want to get your opinion. Right now, Speaker Pelosi wants impeachment to be very laser-focused on the Ukraine, literally detaching from everything before that, starting with anything that happened. July 25th was the phone call, but leading up to that, the months before that. But as if Russia and everything else, the obstruction, the 10 episodes detailed by Mueller, it seems that they actually want to ignore that. Yeah. At least that's her view, because they want to get this done. What do you think? Do you think they should do that? Do you think she bootstrap it in? And if you do bring it in, at what point does it become overwhelming and seem like it's just everything's in there? It's the kitchen sink. This is not as serious as it should be. Because I'm torn on that. I'm very torn on the issue.
Yeah, I think that Nancy Pelosi and Democrats will rue the day that they do not include in articles of impeachment the 10 different ways in which Donald Trump has obstructed justice, the emoluments clause, violation of the emoluments clause, violation of our immigration laws with respect to asylum. Like, I think it's important for the record. You're an attorney, I'm an attorney. The record is important because what happens is when people go back or look back, what they do say, and you saw some of this in the impeachment hearings, is, well, you know what? You didn't pursue articles of impeachment on Russia. You didn't pursue articles of impeachment on, emoluments clause. So that tells me that those things are not important. Right. That tells me that those things are not impeachable offenses, and it lays the groundwork, it lays the foundation for the next president to do those things. Like, you have, like, the whole reason why we do this, the reason why we have law and order is not just to hold someone accountable, but it's to set a precedent as to what is right and what is wrong. You have to sort of make people aware of the standards by which we operate as a country. And if you allow him to get away with that, what does it say about you? And you saw some of those arguments made during impeachment where I can't remember which congressman it was. Oh, I think it was Jim Jordan. And Jim was like, oh, they did the whole Russia, he talked the whole Russia investigation, and they got nothing. They didn't do anything. Right. But that's an argument that you cede. That's an argument that you give up if you do not pursue impeachment on it. Now, with respect to you talking about, oh my God, it's going to be so confusing, I don't know how it's going to work. That is their job. That is their job to figure it out, put it together, and feed it to the American electorate like baby food. Mash that shit up. I mean, that's your job. That's why we elect you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I mean, if they're not good at it, well, I was actually looking up.
Get good. And if you can't get good, step aside and let somebody else to be elected in that position. Yeah.
I was trying to look up the actual Nixon.
I'm kind of tired of these arguments coming from Democrats. Like, we don't know, we can't, I don't know. Then give somebody else the job. Give somebody else the job.
What I really liked is that they did learn from the other hearings to have a professional questioner.
Attorney.
Have a professional attorney.
Yeah.
And Daniel Goldman, former U.S. Assistant U.S. Attorney here in New York, who was an MS contributor, did a very good job. And that made that great point. I was trying to look up the Nixon articles of impeachment. The argument you just made to me was the most compelling argument to add other articles.
Really?
And the reason why I say this, because
Precedent.
Many people have talked about, even though the Nixon articles were not approved by the full House, they were by the Judiciary Committee. The third one was completely on Nixon stonewalling the Congress. And that's the whole thing. Yeah. So now, as a result, Adam Schiff and Democrats go, they did that to Nixon. We're going to do the same thing here for stonewalling us in violation of abuse of power. Yeah. In that context, abuse of power and other things is separate. But in this one, so by giving another article of impeachment on, even if it's a catch-all, I don't care what happens to it, getting that approved, because it will get approved, and let Trump be tried on it. And let's be honest, the Democrats have to think about it this way, and I'd love to get your reaction to this. They're unlikely going to win in the Senate. So this is a political battle we're doing. We're trying to help us to first deter and punish, so you really can't do in punishment, at least deter future. But second, to make it clear to our fellow Americans in an election year how bad Trump is and what he's done. So if you have not followed attention, it'll be good to have 5 articles of impeachment that he's tried on, because the American people, they don't follow it every day, will be like, wow, that's a lot of stuff that guy did.
Exactly.
Even if, because we follow it all the time.
Exactly.
So that's it. You make the greatest point about having it in writing, have it in precedent to deter future presidents. That's really important. That's right. And to have the paper record. Now,
and then there's the whole,
with Todd. I'm like, I'm not sure, but I agree with this.
Right. And then there's the whole accountability thing. Like, you have to be held accountable. You want to sit here and tell me that if President Obama had obstructed justice 10 different ways that he wouldn't have been impeached the next day? Like, stop it. Like, America has to stop it. They have to stop it with the double standards and the weak tea when it comes to Trump. Put some strong tea. Put some strong coffee on the pot. Like, do what you got to do. But if we don't stand for something, we fall for anything.
You know what I like, Midwin? Like, your calm lawyer-esque, and then every now and then you're like, this is it, bang. This is, no, you got to do it. So we'll talk more about impeachment later. I've got to play this and get your reaction. And to me, Tucker Carlson saying yesterday that he is I'm pro-Russia is simply furthering the Trump narrative, that this is part of the Trump playbook. You have to be on Team Russia. You're Team Trump, that means you're Team Russia. And to remind people, and a caller reminded me, and I forgot it earlier, In Charlottesville, when they were chanting, Jews will not replace us, you will not replace us, they also chanted, Russia is our friend. And I played this on the show in the past. White supremacists like Russia a great deal.
Right.
Tucker Klansman.
It's an ethno-state.
Right. Tucker Klansman loves them. So so it's not a joke. Then later in the night, he went on Hannity's and said he was joking about this. He was not joking. He is, and we cut this together. Nothing is out of order. Believe me, the context is there. This is Tucker Carlson last night. Clip number 2, please, with Democrat Richard Goodstein.
Because people are dying on the front lines. You think it's a joke?
Why do I care? Why do I care what's going on in the conflict between Ukraine and Russia? And I'm serious. Why do I care? I'll tell you why. And why shouldn't I root for Russia, which I am? Because why should I root for Ukraine against Russia? I'm sincerely confused. Why shouldn't I root for Russia against Ukraine or Latvia against Moldova? Like, why should I care at all?
So ignorant.
But it's not. It's by design. This is not. I can't believe you can dismiss Tucker Carlson. This show is a well-prepared show. It's a network primetime show, 3 million viewers. This stuff is vetted, what they're going to talk about. Tucker knows he's going to go on and say, I'm pro-Russia. He's doing that because Trump is pro-Russia. This is part of the thing. So the base watches goes like, yeah, I'm pro-Russia. What's wrong with why should I support Ukraine?
It's time for people to start, especially journalists. I'm calling on all investigative journalists to start digging into what is this obsession with Russia in terms of what are the ties? You see every single Republican falling in line. You see every single Republican adopting Russian talking points, such as the fact, CrowdStrike, and it was Ukraine that meddled in the 2016 election, despite the fact that our intelligence agencies have confirmed that it was Russia that attacked us, right? Meddling sounds like, you're in the sandbox and I take your toy. No, they attacked us in 2016. And a recent congressional committee just also concluded that Russia attacked us in 2016. The Mueller report concluded that Russia attacked us in 2016. So I don't understand why these fools are running around talking about Ukraine attacked us in 2016. Like, you look stupid. But
it's made up because we talked about this yesterday in great
it's
length.
ridiculous.
Dr. Fiona Hill testified. No one. Look, folks. I had Sherrod Brown on, the senator. We were going to play a clip. We're going to air it tomorrow. And I said to him very bluntly, if there was a U.S. intelligence agency that came forward and said, Ukraine did attack us as well, I'd say we should investigate that. But they have not said it. They've all said Russia did.
Yeah.
And what Russia did, as we pointed out yesterday, was a military attack. It was the GRU unit, the military intelligence agency of Russia. This was an act of war. That's what I was arguing. It was treason.
It was well organized. It was concentrated. It was. I mean, that's what Fiona Hill basically testified to. It was and it came from Putin. Like this was. Ukraine is a smaller country. Ukraine is a poorer country. So the idea that they would attack our elections on the scale at which we've seen Russia do is unreasonable. It's unlikely. So I don't know if any of these people saying this actually believe it. I just think it's a talking point that they're trumpeting, for lack of a better word, or parroting on behalf of Russia. And it's time we get investigative journalists to start asking why. Why?
Some have. I mean, there's been
not
books
enough. Not enough. They're too busy talking about whether the dog at the White House today was a female or a male. Dumb shit.
Right.
Stop it. Like this.
If you haven't seen it, folks, there was actually a debate about.
Who gives a shit? This democracy is falling apart. Get it together. Start reporting on some real things.
I agree with you.
Like, who paid off Kavanaugh's debts? Why did Kennedy retire from the Supreme Court so abruptly? Like, let's get some real answers to some real issues that have real consequences for our democracy.
I agree with you. So
you know what I mean?
Let's take a break. When we come back, there were two bits of breaking news. One may be more important than the other, dealing with impeachment. We'll be right back. We'll discuss it with my friend Midwin Charles right here on the Dean Obeidallah Show.
Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're live here Tuesday, November 26th. In studio, our friend, attorney Midwin Charles. You see her all the time, doing a great job on The Joy Reid Show, AM Joy, which is must-see television. So the two bits of breaking news, and I'm trying to I'm not doubting they're true. One is from MS, one is from CNN. I wish I could see the story, and the commercial is busily trying to find it. The first one, I no doubt on the facts. CNN's reporting that on the day Donald Trump ordered the release of the aid to the Ukraine, which was September 11th, he knew that the whistleblower complaint had been filed September 9th. So he knew when it was released. So the kind of speculation or the presumption that Trump only released the aid because he was fearful of his whistleblower complaint seems to be now bared out by the facts, because two depositions were released today. Someone must have testified or sources told the administration. So how much, when you're filling in this timeline, and again, it's little bits of a timeline, because we all assumed Trump released the aid on September 11th because of the whistleblower. Adam Schiff said it all the time. Now we know he knew about it. How significant do you think that is?
I think it's significant in terms of putting together the pieces of the puzzle. This is, one of the things I always say with respect to any case that you're building as a defense attorney is the timeline. Because what happened is not as important as when it happened. And so what you have to do is put together a timeline that basically says this happened on that day, this happened on that day, and it's a very important thing and a very valid thing, because of the timing, right? So, for example, had the aid been released before the July 25th call, not really as relevant, not really as important, not really as pertinent, right?
Because the leverage isn't there. They gave him the aid already, and he said, "Hey, I just released the aid, but can you help us out?"
Exactly.
It sounds quid pro quo, but it's already the quid is pro.
It's pro. It's God.
The this for that, they got that
exactly.
already.
And so that's why that's why timing is so important, and a timeline is so important. Now, one of the arguments that a lot of the Republicans were making during the questioning of impeachment was that Trump was so concerned about corruption with Ukraine. That's why he held on to the aid. He was basically vetting this new president because this new president was new and nobody knew who he was. And of course, none of those arguments made any sense, because when the Democrats came back and questioned the witnesses, they were like, you're an expert in anti-corruption. Tell us what someone who has a measuring stick for corruption, what would they do? In other words, if Donald Trump really was concerned about corruption in the Ukraine, here are the 4 things he would have been doing. And I think it was former Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch testified to that.
She did, and so did George Kent did it.
She was like, we would ask for this, we would ask for these metrics, we would, and none of that, and no one.
You would have mentioned the word corruption at least once on
the phone call. At least once on a phone call. At least once on the phone call. And Republicans would have produced witnesses that would have said, yes, the White House called our office or called our agency and said he wants a special report on the Ukraine. He wants a report on this new president. But they weren't able to do that. So that's why the timing of this and this sort of new transcript, I think, is really, really important.
And the other thing, and this is from MSNBC, so I'm literally reading off their screen, folks, and I cannot find an article in the break to back it up, but I have great comments, MSNBC. They're reporting they're the only one that Trump's saying now he never sent Rudy Giuliani to the Ukraine to get dirt on anyone, to investigate anyone. That's all I could read from the quick thing. So Giuliani told Bill O'Reilly. And
Trump told that to Bill O'Reilly.
Trump told to Bill O'Reilly, so it's confirmed. Matt just confirmed it. He's my second source. We can print it. That Trump is now saying, folks, publicly, because he said to Bill O'Reilly, he never sent Rudy to the Ukraine to do what he did, meaning, folks, we might be seeing the beginning of the end of Rudy as the bus is getting closer and closer. And we've seen this movie before. We saw it with Michael Cohen.
Yep.
We saw who else?
We saw it with Manafort.
Paul Manafort. I barely know the guy.
He didn't do much on my campaign. What are you talking about? He managed your campaign, dude.
And it's so this. Wait till
even
Ivanka
with George
does something
Papadopoulos. Remember, he was just a coffee boy.
And then meanwhile, his pictures in an important meeting.
And yet, people still line up to support him and carry his water. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Like, what is wrong with them?
They all have their reason. I mean, sometimes it's very direct. They're making a living from it. Others, they want the power. Others just like to be around power.
You know, it's so funny you say that. I have a friend of mine whose family are Trump supporters. Family members are Trump supporters, and he was talking to me about one of the biggest differences that you see with people who are really, really conservative or really far to the right. Ultra conservative is this sort of respect for power, and this sort of love for the concept of power. And so people who really love power and love this concept of power understand that it requires you to fall in line.
Right.
I don't, you know, I'd love to speak with a sociologist about this or what have you, and
my
you know,
sister's
talk
a
about
psychologist. I'm gonna talk to her tomorrow.
Yeah,
She's
or
coming
just
on the
a, or
show.
just a
I'm gonna ask her.
sociologist, like someone who studies human behaviors. I'd love to hear more about this. And you know, anybody tweet me on this stuff. I think it's really fascinating that's why you almost have this sort of blind faith behind someone, even if that person has been detrimental to you, right? Like the farmers, you know, that have been hurt by the tariffs. And yet, despite that, they're still like, yeah, I still support them no matter what.
It is something we've all been astounded, I think, during the time of Trump, because we've not seen this. And people use terms like cult and everything. There's something, he connects with his base in a way that is unique and alarming at the same time, I have to say.
I agree.
So it goes,
I agree.
It's unique. I've never seen this kind of support.
I agree. And I will go as far as to say that kind of support is not healthy no matter who gets it. Do you know what I mean? Like, in other words, even if it were a Democratic president, I don't think it's healthy to almost be obsessed by an individual, a human being who is a head of state. I think it's dangerous. And you see it, you know, right? On Twitter and online, like people losing their minds for their candidate and this, that, and the third. Like you can support your candidate. I get it. You know, you like their work, you like their record, you like what they stand for. But sometimes with some people, it can get really cultish.
Well, Chris Matthews was on my show a few weeks ago, and he used the term, like, it reminds me of the way certain people have devotion to a religion, which is, without calling it a cult, that's sort of what he was saying. Is kind of, he even had an analogy to like the way people believe in Santa Claus. Even though you know it's not real, you might want to believe in it. And he likened Trump to Santa Claus. But I want to talk, and I'm talking about Midwin Charles, attorney, about the 2020 Democratic race, because lost in a lot of our discussions here is the 2020 Democrats. And I am not supporting any one person. I like all the Democrats wherever I can. The only one I've written an article critical of was Michael Bloomberg because of Bloomberg's stop and frisk policy and also his surveillance of the Muslim community, which his apology was a waste of time on stop and frisk. He's never given one to the Muslim community. Now it would be meaningless. But Mayor Pete Buttigieg is coming under increasing fire. Today on Twitter, he was getting destroyed. It was trending, an article in The Root calling him a lying MF and all about, it had to do with his comments on education. And I want to play the clip. It's from 2011. He was running for mayor, Pete Buttigieg, and they were talking about education. And it's just him speaking at a mayoral race forum. And this clip upset a great deal of people, obviously primarily African-American. What I saw in the way it was being described on Twitter, I can't tell if they're really black or not. On Twitter, they say they're black. I don't know. But I want to get your reaction. Let's play clip number 8. This is Pete Buttigieg from 2011 talking education.
You know, the kids need to see evidence that education is going to work for them, right? So you see a lot of parts of
That's
town
part of the
where-
motivation.
Yeah, because you're motivated because you believe that at the end of your educational process, there's a reward, there's a stable life, there's a job. And there are a lot of kids, especially the lower income minority neighborhoods, who literally just haven't seen it work. There isn't somebody they know personally
And I think that's
who
what it meant
testifies to
during
the
the
value of
Supreme Court.
education.
They
So
need
yeah,
to meet that
you bet.
So what's your reaction, before I read a little bit of what the guy in The Root wrote, what's your reaction to that, what he was saying?
That he don't know no black people.
Is that that's what he's saying?
Yeah.
Tell me why.
See, and I think that in the end, I think this is what it comes down to for a lot of candidates. Not just Pete, not just, you know, remember Bernie Sanders did not do well with black people either. So it's not just Pete's issue. There are other candidates that I don't think will do well with Black people, because in many ways they make it abundantly clear that they don't know a lot of Black people and they don't understand Black people. And that comment tells me that, because you can't tell me that you know Black people and not understand how hard Black people work to make sure that their kids get the best education that they can. We know of Black women who are sitting in jail right now because they put their kids in a different district in which they did not live, okay? So this idea that Black people do not value education is pure bullshit. It's white supremacy on steroids. And all you need to do is look back at all the major litigations filed in federal court over the past 100 years for by Black people to obtain access, just access to higher education, to colleges, to go to school. I mean, what the hell does he think Brown versus Board of Ed was all about?
Right.
I mean, one of the reasons why, and let's not even talk about the amount of funding that goes to minority majority schools,
right.
how woefully inadequate some of these schools are. I mean, there are children going to school in Baltimore. They need coats because there's no heat. So this is a fallacy, and I will push back on this at every single time, because every single Black person I know has parents who are busting their back, working 3-4 jobs to put their kids through school and make sure their kids get into the best schools. I'm not here for that.
And in The Root today, the article first, it talked about majority minority schools receive $23 billion in less funding than majority white schools, and goes on. But the author writes, this is why, talking about Pete's comments, this is why institutional inequality persists, not because of white hoods and racial slurs, is because this insidious double talk erases the problems by camouflaging it, because it is painted as a problem of Black lethargy and not white apathy.
Exactly. It's also ignorance to the fact that, in America, we have a system. It's systemic racism as to why the amounts that you just quoted with respect to underfunding of schools, like, that's systemic racism, and we all know about privilege, and we all know about, if you grow up in a certain neighborhood, you get to go to a public school that is of a higher quality than if you grow up in another neighborhood. And it's just a matter of the zip code that you were born into and where you live. Is that fair? I say no. Right. I think every child in America should have access to the best education available. It makes us a better country, right? Because if you can't get your mail because the person in the mailroom doesn't know how to read, you fucked up too. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we all benefit when everyone has really good quality education. And so the problem with a comment like that is that it refuses to acknowledge systemic racism, as well as all of the hard work that Black people have put into trying to get the best education available. In other words, the unequal system that has been the history of this country. I haven't even gotten into the fact that it was illegal for Black people to be educated at some point. Okay, so we won't even go as far back as that. But when you look at Supreme Court cases that have gone back, the Bakke case. You're an attorney, right? Yep. The Bakke case, which I think was in 1975. That was one of the building blocks of affirmative action. There's so much case progeny on affirmative action, and all of that is Black people trying to gain access to the best schools available that at which they were denied because of the color of their skin. That's it.
So when we get to the point here with Mayor Pete, because in the poll this Monday that came out, Quinnipiac, which is a really good polling, in South Carolina, Mayor Pete registered 0% among Black voters in this poll. Now, of course, it's one poll, and if you have two people in a demographic say they like you, it shows up as different percentages because they're all projecting outward. So it could have been a bad poll for him, but it seems he's having a problem clearly connecting with African American voters. That's what I've seen all over the place. Right. While he's doing great in Iowa and New Hampshire.
Yeah,
now,
but those are all white
I know.
states.
I get that 100%.
Like 90%.
You can't win the Democratic nomination on a white platform. Is there anything
and let me just say, by the way, you're starting to see a backlash on that on the left, but we'll talk about that another day.
Well, what do you think? What could we have a caller Ranell in Atlanta wants to, maybe we'll take his call saying Pete didn't mean harm. But so what if Pete didn't mean harm? What if Pete doesn't know anyone and he's just whatever? I'm not defending him. I'm just saying, just assume best case scenario. He was not intentionally being racist. I think there's problems also with his record when I've talked to African-American political people about this, that in South Bend, the police force was not integrated the way it should be.
And then he fired the black police chief.
So there are other issues. Is there anything he can do that would be credible? You can do things, but is it credible?
Right. And that's a good question. I think
try to reach out and say, look, I made mistakes and I didn't know and I should have known.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you're going to trust me now or not, but here's the best I could do.
I think that's a fair question. I think that's a really good question, right? Because there are other candidates that also on the Democratic side that ought to make inroads to the black community, to black people. The first thing to understand is like black people, we're not a monolith, right? Like not all black people think the same. Not all grow up in quote unquote inner city, whatever that means, or underserved communities.
Trump
you got black,
thinks, I think.
Yeah, of course. That's racist bullshit, though. Of course.
I know.
I mean, you've got black people in the suburbs. You have black people all over. We're all different. Different backgrounds. You have black people from the Caribbean. You have black people directly from Africa. Recent immigrants. People who have been here for generations. So we're not a monolith. And so I think if a candidate wants to speak to the black community, they have got to put forth an agenda that centers black people. In other words, the issues that black people specifically are facing in America, which are very unique, right? No other group is facing some of the problems that African Americans are facing. The biggest one that comes to mind is being killed by the police. Okay. And so that's one of the biggest ones. And there are others, right? Environmental racism, education, healthcare, black women 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women, and with no bearing on socioeconomic class. So women with 2-3 degrees also dying, black women with 2-3 degrees, the same with a poor black woman. That's a huge problem. I want to hear what it is that you're going to do about that.
That's interesting.
And so I think one, your agenda, and 2, start making inroads with the black community.
Is it too late for him? By the way, Congressman Brenda Lawrence, who's on at the top of the hour, is not just talking about her support for impeachment, that she just had a town hall on mortality of black women.
Yes.
And there's 3 to 1.
It's a huge issue.
And that
it's a huge
so I'm going to
issue.
have her share what she learned from her
It's
town
a huge
hall
issue.
on that very issue and what people were saying to her.
Yeah. And with the Democratic candidates running right now, the first candidates I ever heard mention that was Kamala Harris before she even declared she was running, Julian Castro, maybe Cory Booker. But I had been paying attention to see who talks about the issues that matter to me and mine for a long time. And this isn't just for Buttigieg. I mean, people tend to forget that there are other people running, right? Andrew Yang and Amy Klobuchar. And, no one's talking about why Amy isn't polling with black people.
But of course, he's lead because he's now at the top. If he was at 2% still, that's why. But
I get it.
But it's remarkable about female black mortality for childbirth that there's no rhyme or reason about what you were saying. Like, it's race. It's right. No, that's it. But that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not about where you live.
It's not.
It's literally about discrimination.
Not. Yes.
And that black women's complaints are not taken as
They're not taken as seriously.
I don't know why. That makes no sense to me.
Why? Yeah, because at the root of systemic racism is this concept that black people are not full, realized human beings. And it's why when we are victims of crime, our victimization is not respected. It is not. When black children go missing, they are not looked for the way white children are when they go missing. We live in a society that is constantly telling black people that your life does not matter. It's why Black Lives Matter was born, because we are constantly being told, specifically or indirectly through the system in which we live, that your life doesn't matter. Your pain doesn't matter. What happens to you doesn't matter. If you were stopped and frisked and we didn't find anything, oh well. The denigration, the humiliation doesn't matter. The fact that you were raped and we're not going to look into who your rapist was, your pain doesn't matter. That is, I think, at the core of what you see happening with this healthcare issue. And I can tell. I mean, I make sure that if any of my elderly aunts or uncles have to go to the hospital, someone from my generation always accompanies them, because we want to make sure that they're being looked after properly. And of course, this goes for a lot of everyone, right, in the healthcare industry. But there is a specific sort of cavalier attitude towards Black patients. And so Black people have to be extra diligent in dealing with their doctors and asking questions and what have you. That is really at the root of this horrific statistic that we're talking about. And it's astonishing.
It is.
I mean, these are third world statistics.
And it was astonishing. I had heard the numbers before, and today, in reading a little before Congresswoman Lawrence comes on, because we're town hall, I was stunned by it again. So it happened when you brought it up. Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more with our friend Midwin Charles right after this.
Yeah.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
You're listening to the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're chatting with Midwin Charles here about a lot of issues. One is a 2020 race. I got to ask you now, so in the articles in the last few days, there were so many articles this week about Buttigieg and struggling with African-American voters. And it said here, more recently, he's tried to connect with Black voters by talking about his own struggle for civil rights as an openly gay man. And that is a true, and as someone, I was talking in the break to Midwin, as someone who is a minority myself, I can understand the idea of frustration. But how do you walk that line where you don't seem like you're trying to say my struggle is the same as African Americans, which was the most unique struggle in this country because no one else was brought as property here and then discriminated against, first killed,
legally,
raped, and everything.
Right. It was part of the law. I always remind people that. It was the law.
It was in the Constitution.
It was in the Constitution.
So how do you walk that line? Is there a way that he actually can talk about this in a way that might resonate without being completely disrespectful and dismissive of the actual struggle of African Americans?
I think the first thing he has to do is he really has to do a better job of explaining what he did in South Bend, because he is, first of all, he isn't polling well with Black people because we don't know him. Ain't nobody ever heard of him. Okay. So this idea that you think Black people would want to vote for you just because is, I don't know where you get that from. Like, why do you think, like, ain't nobody ever heard of you, buddy? Like, who are you? Like, what? And why do you expect Black people to vote for you without A, courting the Black community, B, showing your agenda for the Black community, and C, being able to explain your record? This idea that he doesn't want to be judged on his record is privilege. It really is. Everybody else is judged on their record. Everybody else is judged on their past decisions, because that tells us how you will govern if you are president. And I want to make sure as a Black person that you are not going to throw me under the bus, right? Like we talked a little bit about Michael Bloomberg, I think during the break with stop and frisk and what have you. You can't marginalize people and strip them of their civil rights just so you can appease the white majority. Okay? Mm-hmm. And then, just so you can appease the white majority, and then when it's time for people to come looking, when it's time for election, you come to the Black community, you come to the church, you come to the chicken dinners, and you get your collard greens and your biscuits and what have you, and you think Black people will vote for you. No, because you have a record now, right? Michael Bloomberg has a record, Mayor Pete has a record in South Bend, and that record ought to be examined, and they ought to be questioned on that record. Like that they should anticipate. He should anticipate this. He should have anticipated not being able to do well with the Black community. I don't know where he gets off thinking that he should be doing better. Why? Look at your record in South Bend. Explain it. And same goes for all of them.
And by the way, in Bloomberg,
same with Kamala. I think Kamala has to do a better job of explaining her prosecutorial record as well.
And by the way, with Mayor Bloomberg, in January of this year, he was still defending stop and frisk.
Yes!
January of this year, folks. Not like 3 years ago.
Come on.
So I'm like, how is anyone going to buy?
So let me get this straight. You think that after your record of stop and frisk, after fighting to give a settlement to the Central Park Five, after your extrajudicial monitoring of Muslim communities after 9/11,
it's horrible.
Right. After, and a lot of people aren't even talking about all the energy he put into displacing a lot of communities for private developers to come in and build, right? And what did that do to the homeless? What did that do to the homeless population? So again, he has a record. That record needs to be examined, and your record tells me that you're okay with stepping on a particular group of people. So why would I vote for you? And the case can be made.
Right.
The case can be made, but make that case. Don't think that people ought to just vote for you because you are the heir apparent. Get out of here.
So
get out of here. Work for it. Work for it.
Barack Obama,
and that's one of the things I like about.
Iowa.
And that's one of the things I like about Kamala and Corey and Castro. They're working for it.
So we got
they're working for it. They hustling. I like that. That's what I want to see. You want my vote? Come and get it.
That I was going to ask you we have like a minute and a half before I have to take a break, but. Mm-hmm. Is there any candidate that's impressing you in the way they are going to the African American community, the Black community, and going, hey, I get, and then they're saying things that make sense and resonate?
Yeah. I think Kamala, I think Corey, Julian, those three.
But why are they not moving up in the polls?
I don't know, but I'm just answering the question you asked me, which is who is talking about the things that matter to me,
right,
and providing solutions to fix the problems.
If Biden wasn't Obama's VP, obviously that would be. But if he wasn't, he's just a guy running for president, he would not be where he is. So I can't say, but for the huge thing. So he is who he is.
Listen. I will say, I've said this all over, and I will say it again. I will vote blue no matter who.
Exactly.
Okay?
We're all going to do that.
I'm voting blue no matter who. And frankly, I always have. And for the record, most Black women always have. So, I don't want to hear from nobody talking about, Black people should have. No. Black people are the most consistent Democratic voters you will ever meet. Right. So have a seat. Apart from that, my concern about Biden is he seems to be stuck in another time. We are right now in this country facing some very unique new problems, or at least the problems are manifestations of old problems.
Right.
I don't know that Biden's up for the task.
Let's take a quick break. Be right back with Midwin Charles.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And now, more of the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show, live here Tuesday, November 26th. Midwin, I want to thank you for spending the hour. We covered a lot of ground, a lot of topics.
I love being in set here with you. It's different from phoning in.
Oh my God, it's so much better because we actually communicate and look at each other and talk. And I learned a lot from you about law and politics, and also, frankly, about race, because I'm always learning. So where can people follow you on Twitter before we run out of time?
At Midwin Charles, Instagram at Midwin. Pretty pictures.
Check out at Midwin on Instagram. Thank you so much, Midwin, for being here.
Absolutely.
Folks, we'll come back next hour. Danny Savalas will be here, but Congressman Brenda Lawrence for the first few minutes at the top of the hour, right after this quick break.